Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Wholehearted Podcast. And today we have with us Michelle Mah, a very good friend of mine, and we get on very well together. We only met each other like 1 year ago on LinkedIn.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, but we've been engaging on each other's posts, and we just totally click. So Michelle is, I would say, she's done a lot of things. But I think everything that she's doing is all around well-being at work.
Yeah.
And she is a qualified psychotherapist. She's a TEDx speaker, a mindfulness expert, and also an eating disorder survivor. And I think we're going to get into a lot of things with Michelle today. So, Michelle, welcome to the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Coen. It just feels like I'm going to talk to a friend. So
Exactly. Actually, the way I run my podcast is like it's conversations with friends, right? So it's not all so serious. We have a lot of fun. We just like hang out and we just discuss things that really matter and we go deep.
Yeah.
Right. So we normally start our podcast with a quick question around wholehearted leadership. So what does wholehearted leadership mean to you?
You know, when I saw this question, I really thought very much about it because it's not a word that I use very often. But when I dive deep into really thinking about what does being wholehearted mean, I feel that it's about radical self-honesty. And it's really confronting, the things in your life that hold you back, your relationships, your ego. And when we look at the word, just on the surface, it feels like it's very soft, it's very poetic. But in fact, it's extremely uncomfortable to lead a wholehearted life because you need to peel away those layers. You need to know where are the blockers in your life that's holding you back? Where are your limiting beliefs? What sort of relationships do you need to let go? What sort of boundaries do you have to put in place to be able to lead life on your own terms? And I think that's what wholehearted living means to me.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, you have just opened up so much already, right? There's so much to unpack over there, right? So we'll go further into this in a moment. I totally believe in you. I actually wholeheartedly agree with you. I believe that a lot of leaders, when they don't do the inner work, what happens is that they subconsciously and unconsciously propagate a lot of their own personal trauma into the workplace, into the way they lead people around them. So that actually creates a lot more, lack of wellness at the workplace. Right? So I think that's important.
Yeah.
So what are some of the obstacles for leaders leading wholeheartedly?
I think, especially growing up in very Asian household, I think fear is one of the biggest blockers to living a wholehearted life. And looking at it from, just leaders or individuals in general, living a wholehearted life is really about self-leadership. It's about what are we, knowing what we are fearful of. Are we fearful of judgment? Are we fearful of what other people say about us? Do we live with our inner critic? Like, I think we are so conditioned as a society and through our education system that many of us do not live a wholehearted life because we are living our life from a place of scarcity and fear. And I think that's also a survival mechanism to protect ourselves from pain. And it took me a long time to be able to unwire and uncondition myself from that because I did the whole Singapore thing, get good grades, get a good job. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so vulnerable and opening up. So that segues very nicely into this deep topic straight away. In your TED Talk, you talk about your eating disorder and also your body image shame, right? So let's dive right into that.
Sure.
So can you share with me what is the moment in your life when you had this realization that, your relationship with your body was unhealthy?
So sometime in my 20s, I realized that I became a lot more vain. And I always thought that, okay, probably it's because of the industry that I was in. I was in media communication. So you're kind of surrounded by good-looking things, pretty people, handsome people. So I had that desire of, just wanting to look thinner. I actually was bullied as a kid. And when when I got into my mid-20s, I never saw that link into my childhood, and I had to confront many parts of it. So I think it escalated to a point where I was going for, TCM treatments, like those 拔罐 and all, just to lose weight. And I remember very distinctly, even to today, that when I stepped into that TCM center, which actually is a disguise for a slimming treatment center, that people were actually slimmer than me, and they looked so slim. And because they were there, I thought that there was nothing wrong with me being there, because people that were skinnier than me were there. So that kind of perpetuated a cycle of, I wanted to be thin, I wanted to look perfect, and I had that ideal of, once I hit 45 kilograms, I'll be happy, which was not the truth. Because when I hit 45 kilos, I realized that I was actually more unhappy and miserable than I had ever been in my entire life. Yes, so that was that moment when I knew that I had to change, and I had to make a very drastic change, because I was working for a company, a brand agency that dealt with food packaging. So Lay's, Kellogg's, Friesland Campina, Coke, whether the color red in Coke is the same as the color red in Philippines versus Singapore. So being bombarded with those images, I felt that, my therapist helped me to move out of that. And eventually I left my role, even though it looked really nice to be in that role. If I carried on with the way I was living, I think I may have lost my life. So it was quite a close shave to be able to catch myself before things were too late. Yes.
Personally, I was also overweight as a child. I was very chubby. I was 99 kilograms in secondary 4. For listeners who do not know secondary 4, right, 16 years old in Singapore. But I never really went through a journey of eating disorder. So maybe I do not know as much about the eating disorder. So tell me a little bit more about your experiences with the eating disorder. What did you do?
So there are different kinds of eating disorders. Before we go, dive deep into the different types. But the one that I was diagnosed with is bulimia nervosa, and I also had body dysmorphia that occurred at the same time. So my form of bulimia was characterized by eating and purging. I had many rounds of eating and purging, to a point where I was kind of eating in secret, binging and purging 10 over times a day. And I saw myself as so imperfect. And body dysmorphia, well, if you look up about it on the condition, it's basically a condition where you see a perceived defect about yourself. So it could be acne, or it could be like, and for me it was like arms and thighs. Like I hated looking at myself in the mirror, because like my thighs were too fat, my arms were too fat, and I needed that thigh gap. So I think one of the biggest myths of eating disorders is that it is only about vanity. It's only about being thin. But when we dig deep within eating disorders, and that is what makes it so complex and hidden, is that it's not really about the looks itself. It's really about control, shame, trauma, for me, childhood wounds, and just wanting to protect ourselves from further harm. And it doesn't only apply to teenage girls as well. In fact, men have the highest increasing rates of eating disorders at a faster rate than women. And it is the second deadliest mental health condition after opiate addiction. So it's so hidden that many people look so healthy. Like, people saw me and they saw, oh yeah, Michelle's thriving in her career. She looks great. She's exercising and all. But it's so hidden that when I opened up to my family and my friends, they were utterly shocked. And the myth is that we may think that this person might be, just prioritizing their diet or prioritizing movements or exercise, but it could be the start or the onset of an eating disorder, for example. Yeah.
What you shared, something really struck me. It's not about looking good. It's not about your body, but it's more about control. It's about shame. So these are all some of the more underlying meta level things
Yeah.
that is not seen. It's underneath the surface, underneath the hood, for want of a better word. Talk to me about control. How is that linked to control? Help me understand that.
Yeah, so for me, because I was in jobs that required me to always be on, it was quite demanding. And I felt that I didn't have a sense of control over my work. I felt that if I needed to be successful in one area of my life, and that one area isn't work, it has to be something else. So because it was so, like the world was spiraling out of control, the only means of escape that I had was to turn to food, because I felt that I could control the eating and the binging and the purging. It was that one thing that I held on to as a lifeline, ironically. Yeah.
Wow. So it feels like there's a lack of identity outside of work for yourself. And so you're desperately trying to like cling on to either an ideal identity of yourself, or like you're trying to forge an identity of yourself, and through your controlling of your eating, your diet, and also wanting to be slim. Is that a way of you trying to form your identity?
I guess I was trying to have, or rather be perfect. I think the theme of perfectionism came up a lot. For me, like I needed to have control over how I looked, over what I ate, how I appeared to others, and that showed up in the behaviors that I exhibited as well. And because being perfect in a world that seemingly seemed to kind of spiral out of control was my means of survival at that point in time. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, man. Because now you're helping me to connect the dots as well. Because as a friend, right, sometimes I would just comment to you and say, hey, look at this person. She's so pretty, and it sort of like somehow like hit a raw nerve with you, and then you're a little disturbed by that.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking to myself, it's such an innocuous comment, right? It's like, but why you affected by that? But now understanding this, right, helps me to understand, like, why are you? You have a past history with this, you have a past trauma with this, and therefore that's the reason why this really hits home very close to your heart. And so it's very useful
I appreciate
for me as well.
just coming on and just sharing more about this, because it's really a lot of, there's more psychoeducation that could be done in this space.
Definitely. I'm sure that you are doing your best, right, to actually provide this education to people.
Yeah.
Right. And you also mentioned, I think previously as we were talking, right, that one of your gateway for healing and out of this, right, is self-compassion.
Yes.
And self-compassion is a topic that you teach.
Yes,
it's
indeed.
a topic that you're very passionate about. I think you can talk all day about it.
Yeah, I can talk all day about it. Yes.
Okay. First of all, right, I think of myself as quite a compassionate person.
Yeah.
But perhaps I'm not quite self-compassionate.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the things I help my clients with in my coaching programs is really about radical self-acceptance.
Yep.
But when you mention the word self-compassion, that really tickled me, that really fascinated me, that really intrigued me, and I want to dive deeper into this rabbit hole with you.
Yes.
So what is self-compassion? What is self-compassion? Yeah.
So before I do that, I just want to touch on what you said about, many of us are very compassionate, but we don't have that same kind of compassion to ourselves. And I'm always reminded by this quote: if the circle of compassion doesn't include us or ourselves, it's not complete. And we have to step into the circle to be able to complete that circle of compassion outwards and internally, to be, in your words, live a more wholehearted life. Yeah, so, self-compassion to me, there's three components. The very obvious one is self-kindness, which is having the same kind of care that we give for someone to ourselves, being kind to ourselves that we see people talking about. There's also the element of mindfulness, which is, knowing what's happening as it's happening, having that self-awareness to know that, my inner critic is here. Today I'm not quite feeling like myself, and it's okay to say no. So it all starts with self-awareness, to be able to be self-compassionate. And lastly would be the element of common humanity. Why do people feel so lonely in what they do? Why do they, when they struggle with difficult emotions like guilt and shame and fear, why do they feel that they are the only person that's going through this?
Oh.
When we look at the third component, which is common humanity, we realize that whatever emotions that we are feeling is likely faced by someone else in the room, and that humans all have the very similar range of emotions. We experience the same types of emotions, but somehow we feel very alienated and very isolated. So self-compassion allows us to see that or bridge that gap.
But let me take it further back a bit, right? It's like if they're not even aware of their own feelings, right? How can they even, have this sense of, hey, we have this shared experience, this shared common humanity that you mentioned about, right? It's like people are often quite numb because we almost thought that, emotions are not a good thing. Emotions get in the way of our studies. Emotion get in the way of climbing the corporate ladder, right? So we almost tune out our emotions.
Yeah. So I see self-compassion and mindfulness because you first need to have that self-awareness to be able to know that you're actually struggling and to be able to ask that quintessential question, what do I need right now in this moment? It's not that holiday that you're waiting for like 1 week down the road because that takes you out of that moment. But when you're in the moment itself and you're having a conflict or a difficult interaction with someone, what is that one thing that you can do for yourself that helps you to soothe that difficult emotion? And it all starts from mindfulness first, being mindful of, being self-aware that you need to hold the space for yourself.
Wow. And so I also hear this phrase often. It's like, humanity, right? It's like the world is a mirror to you, right?
Yes.
Very often the world, sometimes we think of ourselves as, whoa, we are lonely, we are feeling fearful, we are feeling sad, shame. But actually, it's more common than we realize. We think that we are the only one, right? So we sometimes victimize ourselves in this victim story. It's like, oh, why me? Poor me. Why am I feeling this way? Why is the world have it out for me?
Yeah.
But sometimes if we actually realize, right, we are not alone.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's this like shared human consciousness, right? That's affected. But I always find that also a very metaphysical idea. It's like a little woo-woo out there.
Yeah.
But when you put it in the sense of common humanity, it helps me understand it a little bit better.
Yeah.
But to help me understand that even further, right? It's like, how does the awareness of common humanity helps us to bond and connect better instead of feeling like we are so isolated?
I think when we realize that we are more similar than different, it shifts the energy of our own presence in the world as well, and that we are not just living alone and going through life alone, but there are others that are journeying through life. When I am going through a very rough period and I feel quite alone, and maybe some of my friends might not understand how I feel, I always think of someone else in the US or in Europe or someone else in the world that is actually going through the same thing as me, and that somehow brings me a level of comfort. And I think when we kind of just kind of move it more into the modern way of the world, I think why communities are thriving, why people crave for connection and community is really to tap on that sense of common humanity, even though they may not call it as such, but really to vibe and to be with and to have people who has gotten your back. I think that is essentially common humanity.
Yeah, I think human beings are actually tribal creatures. It's like in the past, right, when we were living in caves and everything, being in your same tribe, right, is actually survival, right? Because when you meet like a beast in the wild, right, it's like it always pays to stand together. I think I read somewhere, I think it was Priya Parker who wrote a book about gathering, the art of gathering.
Yeah.
It's like we have this need for, community, this need for togetherness. But we are feeling so splintered right now. Like we even we are like divided by political interest.
Yeah.
We are divided by so many things, right? And even the whole DE&I movement, right? We're divided by all these different segmentation. How can we actually bring people more together in the world today? I know we talk about community building, but the truth of the matter is there are still a lot of lonely people.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things that I had to learn is to also look beyond the visible differences. Because, I mean, just, looking at, we see physical differences, but when we peel away those layers, when we dig deeper, human beings have so much more in common. You may be a parent, you may be a spouse, a partner, and everyone wants that similar things. If you strip away the superficial stuff, we all want to be seen. We all want to belong. We all want to be connected. We want to be safe and free from harm. And I think bridging, or rather going into that space, allows people to connect more from a heart level rather than from a mind level, like, oh, I see you're different. Coen, you wear specs, you are male. You're so different from me as Michelle as female. So I think we don't do that enough as a society. And I wish that, the people that are teaching this in the world, even we talked a little bit about internal family systems, it's about embracing the different parts of you that make you who you are. And there are no bad people, there are no bad parts, I think. There's just circumstances. Yeah.
Do you think that women tend to need more self-compassion, especially in a society that expects them to be, to your words earlier, the idea about perfection, right? What it means to be a perfect woman, right? To be capable in your career, to be a responsible mom, to be a responsible daughter, responsible wife. I think there's so much pressure on women. Do you think that women more than men needs self-compassion?
Yeah, I could probably talk the whole day on this. I think
I figured you could. I figured you would talk all day about this.
I think women have, so much pressure on themselves. It's like, who told us to be so hard on ourselves? Yes, society does, but a lot of the pressure also comes from our own expectations of ourselves. And sadly, I think while women need to support other women, unfortunately, there are some women that don't have the backs of other women. And it's hard to be self-compassionate to yourself when the expectations of you are so high. Because now if I look at myself, I'm a young mom of 2 young kids, and I'm also expected to thrive at work. I'm expected to pick my kids up, but sometimes I peel away from that and I'm like, who gave me the expectation? And I realized that society's narrative of what a mom should be, a successful mom should be, and that I show up for my kids in different ways. So because of, society and some of the narratives that are out there, the inner critic can get very loud for women. Like, I'm not good enough. Someone else is better than me. Someone else deserves that promotion. It's not me. And we play very small. And I'm still learning, and I really had to endure a couple of hard knocks along the way of why did I play so small so that I could fit into society's ideals of what a woman should be like. Women definitely need self-compassion to be able to navigate the things that they are saying to themselves, because no one else is hearing it except themselves.
There's also, of course, this idea of self-love, right? I mean, what those the most cheesy and cliche things? Self-love, right? It's like, hey, I'm going for a massage today. I'm going to treat myself to a nice meal and all that self-love. But I think that's very superficial. That's very kind of surface level. It's like you could have a massage a day and then you can feel guilty after that for saying, hey, I did nothing today. I wasn't productive, right? So what exactly is self-compassion different? Like, how do people often get wrong about self-compassion? What do people normally get wrong about self-compassion? And how do they actually get it right?
I think one of the most common misperceptions of self-compassion is that it is soft. It is a soft thing that, is only suitable for women. But in fact, self-compassion builds resilience in us. Self-compassion, research has shown that self-compassion actually trains and imbues more resilience long-term in youths and adults alike than talking about self-esteem, for example. Self-compassion is in-the-moment self-care and asking yourself that really important question, tapping into your own body's wisdom. What do I need right now? Do I need a glass of water? Maybe beyond that, it could be, oh my gosh, I really need to step away from this conversation and revisit it. So what do I need? How do I honor my own innate wisdom to be able to give me the answers and use that to guide my actions?
Okay, just for our listeners at home, right? What are maybe like 3 or to 5 things they can do next week to start like having more self-compassion?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yes,
some
wow.
practical
3 to
tips.
5
Yeah,
things.
some practical tips.
Okay,
Yeah.
so self-compassion. So I would actually start with maybe asking that question. I think this is the third time I'm repeating this on the podcast, so it's quite important. Asking yourself, what do I need? Because for many of us, we think from the head. We operate from the head because we are wired to be like that. But we don't tap into the heart as often. But when you ask that question, what do I really need? And it's not about, if your answer is something that's going to be like, oh, I need more money, then maybe I would say question that. Like maybe you need security instead of money.
Yeah.
Maybe you need validation instead of money. So
Yeah.
asking yourself, what do I need?
Yes.
Gives you that opportunity for inner work, to deepen your own self-awareness. Second, I would say maybe have like 3 to 5 things that you can do, 3 to 5 short activities that you can do for the in-the-moment self-care. So rather than booking that holiday, or rather than, I can't wait for brunch with my girlfriend so that I can talk about, what's going on at work. What can I do for myself today? Is it journaling? Is it putting on some spiritual music? And then lastly, I tell myself this all the time, like, this is a moment of suffering. It's like you don't have to, solve the problem or fix or do anything. It's just acknowledging that, oh my gosh, I'm actually suffering right now. This is a moment of suffering. And just holding yourself, like, I encourage people, if you have a teddy bear, just go hug your teddy bear. We use so much of our phones as a new age teddy bear that, we don't have all these soothing tools anymore as adults, but we need them, because one of the things that we emphasize a lot in the self-compassion program is the element of physical touch, because as mammals, we need that physical touch. So be it, having a shower, giving yourself a hug, bilateral stimulation, or just wrapping yourself in a blanket. Those are soothing ways that you can soothe yourself.
So beautiful. And basically, I think the common theme among all the 3 things that you shared, right, is about building up your own agency.
Yes.
Those are things you can do for yourself, like asking myself, what do I need? What can I do to soothe myself in the moment? Instead of saying, hey, I look forward to brunch with my girlfriends, and because that still leaves the agency to other people.
Yes,
right? So for example, if your friends are not there for you, they're not free for you for whatever reasons, right? Then you're going to be crushed again.
You will feel like worse about yourself because they're not there, and you are relying on them for support, when ultimately the only person that can help us is ourselves. So when you expand the inner resourcing toolkit, you're just really allowing yourself to be a better version.
All right, Michelle, so I want to get into something else around, wholehearted leadership and wholeheartedness. So one key thing about wholeheartedness is really about reclaiming your voice. And I know that from one of your recent LinkedIn posts that when you were growing up, you were being labeled as timid and overly emotional. You were being called a crybaby. You almost felt like your emotions are not being validated. And you almost felt like you need to kind of like put your emotions away, silence yourself. So talk us through your journey of reclaiming your voice.
So growing up, I think my parents didn't know better than to parent the way they did. And a lot of that revolved around protection. So I'll protect my kid from harm. I will not. I will protect my girl from failure, from talking to strangers. So I was never really given that opportunity to explore outside of what they deemed was safe for me. Even when I was learning in school and I was mingling with friends, my parents would tell me to steer clear away from, certain people or certain friends because they might try and push me off the slide at the playground. So growing up, I instilled that belief that, maybe the world is not quite safe. And I don't blame my parents because they wanted to parent me in the best way that they thought they could, right? But growing up, I just felt like, okay, maybe my voice is better to let someone else lead because they know better. So I left a lot of the decisions and possibly also lost a lot of that autonomy along the way. And I really only started to explore my voice after junior college. So I joined this huge training company, and I really realized that I liked that whole working with people and impacting lives. But because I had such an ingrained belief of, just play it small, play it by the rules, and the path ahead will be secured for you, I did what a conditioned local Singaporean would do, which is graduate from your degree and then do something completely related. Even though there was that voice that said, maybe you should do this because after junior college you have seen yourself, growing and liking this area. But no, I chose to do comms. So it wasn't until my eating disorder and the mental health challenges that led me to that lowest point in my life, and I started to reclaim back that voice bit by bit by sharing about my story, sharing about my journey. And I found that, hey, my voice could be used to empower and it could be used to inspire and to influence. And it was something that I never really explored in my 20s. So I got very, very good at reading the room as a child, as a teenager, because you're always told you play small, like be safe. So automatically, I think my brain was trying to filter out danger for me. So I got very quick and very good at being sensitive with people in the room, being emotionally attuned to people's emotions or feelings. Like even now, when someone walks into the room, I can kind of get a feeling of, what they are actually bringing with them on the actual day. And I think that's really because I've been told not to push against the status quo for a long time. So right now it's, reclaiming that voice bit by bit and just seeing myself step into my own personal power. Yeah.
That's beautiful. You mentioned early on that you were conditioned to think that the world is a dangerous place. Do you still think to some extent that the world is a dangerous place? And how do you reclaim or search out or seek out these little pockets of safety?
Yeah. I think the world, not going to sugarcoat things, I think the world these days have evolved tremendously from my childhood, and there is definitely danger. But I think to just see the world like that is not opening myself up to the beauty and the positivity of the world and the full range of the entire human spectrum. So while danger lies on one side, there could be safety, there could be trust, there could be humanity, compassion on the other end, because we are working with dualities. So danger can only exist if we know what safety was and how presence feels like. I think many people, you're spot on in saying, many people are not emotionally in tune with themselves or attuned. We operate so much on the cognitive levels of the brain that we forget that there's also the heart and gut intelligence. I think it really all starts with oneself, because if we look at the world and how dangerous or unsafe it is, it can be quite depressing. It can be quite overwhelming. When I deal with people, I always advocate for self-awareness. Tuning into yourself, listening to what the body and the mind already and the heart already knows, rather than what society wires you to be. Because a lot of it is when we interact with people, I think it's not 100% danger, but we may feel unsafe because the other person may not have a level of emotional intelligence to be able to align with what we need at that point in time. And as such, it then becomes a little bit dangerous, and we don't feel like, okay, I can confide in this person because he's not on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
So it really starts with knowing yourself,
Mm.
and from knowing yourself, how can you expand that to your interpersonal relationships?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the in between the lines here is really you talk about how you started becoming more courageous to be vulnerable, to share more about yourself. But I think that comes with a caveat, right? That comes with a caveat that you are in a safe space, right? It's like it's very easy for us to advocate, hey, be vulnerable, be open, share with yourself. But we cannot just advocate that without the precondition of safety, because if people share of themselves and they get judged, they get cancelled, or there just isn't that emotional validation, it can actually re-traumatize them. It can actually have a bigger effect, a bigger negative effect, right, for vulnerability. And then it only just causes people to do what Brené Brown calls armoring up. So they'll just armor up, right? So how do you know, some tips, right, since you can read the room, how do you know if when you walk into a space or when you meet someone, how do you know, what do you look for signs of safety? How do you know that the place is safe?
I think for me, I don't really know how to explain this actually. Sensing the energy of the room, looking at people's expressions. So the very direct, very obvious signs that you can tell when you walk into a room. So for example, if you're facilitating and you walk in and you're doing your setup and suddenly you just feel like maybe this group is a little bit off, or maybe it's going to be a powerful training session because the energy just feels right.
Yeah.
You cannot have safety by demanding for it.
Yeah.
I think it needs embodiment. And embodiment, be it from the team itself or from people themselves, it takes a lot of time. In your trade as well, as a coach, as a speaker, it's very easy to talk about, okay, this is a safe space and anybody can share what they share. But we have to remember that there might be repercussions and consequences for them when we leave the room as external people.
Yeah.
Because what will they be penalized for?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all boils down to culture. And with that, I do give time for a lot of open-ended questions for people to share. Usually it takes like one person to share a story, a personal story, and then it gives others the permission to open up. An example that was very powerful, this team is facing quite a fair bit of stress because of AI changes, restructuring exercises happening. And prior to the training, I'm not quite sure if the leader of the team was well liked. And if there was going to be enough psychological safety in the room.
Yeah.
But what happened was when myself and my co-facilitator shared, when people started to open up, somehow on the last hour of the 2-day training, he shared about his story, his personal journey dealing with a stillbirth child. And it just kind of like you can sense that the entire atmosphere just got heavier. But that in itself was a moment of vulnerability, and it was a shared moment of suffering.
Wow.
And it wouldn't have come to that point if we didn't invite for introspection, if we didn't invite more silence for that to happen. And I just thought that was so powerful.
Wow, I'm just hearing it, and the word that came to my mind is magic. There's an alchemic effect of that particular sharing. I think for the sharer of the story, for the leader himself to be so vulnerable, it's almost like he's walked through a portal of humanity, of a shared, like you said, shared suffering, and it just really catalyzed and really transformed the environment, the atmosphere. And since you talked about this team that you were working with, and then there wasn't a lot of trust in the environment, it really, and you're talking about them really facing stress, right? So it segues nicely into this conversation around workplace stress, right? Do you feel that, there is a lot of unspoken stress in the workplace that, has to be given a voice. If not otherwise, right, you will just be unheard, and people will just continue to bottle up their stress and may one day just burn out.
Yeah, I do think we have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And just coming in from, a bystander on two sides, like someone that's offering B2B solutions and someone that's, a therapist seeing clients in the room. The two data sets inform each other. So there are people that are stressed out, burnout, overwhelmed, toxic workplaces coming in via the clinic. And there are also stories that you hear privately from the corporate organization. So people have stuff that they're going through. And, I personally have heard things like, I can't share that my mom has dementia and I'm taking care of her. If not, I'll be labeled as 小 or like I'm taking time off as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, because this lady that, and it's a very common one, dementia is on the rise, and a lot of us are caregivers to the elderly.
Yeah.
And employees are afraid of sharing because then, if they knock off at 5 o'clock or if they come in late, then they may be penalized. But actually they are caring. So in a climate of layoffs, can we really blame them for not wanting to share? We can't, because they are just doing what they think is best for them, which is self-preservation.
It's something that's really, really strike me is this disconnect, right? I'm still struggling to reconcile this. I think coming out of the pandemic, there's this rising consciousness of the desire to self-actualize, right? People were talking about, what's the purpose of my life? What is it that I really want to do? And, finding purpose, finding meaning in the work. And because of that, a lot of people quit, right? And so there's this like search for meaning. There's this flight to meaning. But now, the current climate is one of survival. So I don't know whether I might be too simplistic with this. It's like that the whole climate is one of survival. Everyone's in survival mode. And I know that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, originally when Maslow came up with this theory, it was never meant to be a hierarchy. But I do not know how we actually end up sorting this into a hierarchy. But it doesn't quite seem to square right now because, we're talking about survivorship, which is at a level 1 need, and self-actualization, which is a high level 5 need.
Yeah.
So on one hand, there's the need for people to have meaning. On the other hand, there are people in survival mode. I think, how do we make sense of this?
I think that people want both. They want both survival and they want meaning.
Yeah.
But because we live in a society like Singapore that, standard of living is really high, we have no choice but to prioritize survival because we need money. We need financial stability in order to feed ourselves, feed our family, and to move ahead. So then meaning, self-actualization, finding purpose takes a lower priority compared to survival. But I think it's still there. I think people still want it. They just don't know how to figure it out. And there's just so much going on social media as well about, I could run a passive income business, this and that. Like, people don't know where to turn to for answers anymore. Yeah. And if an individual is someone that looks outward for answers rather than inwards, then the mind will be even more cluttered. Because you are spoiled for choice. We are in we are in a generation where knowledge is not a problem. You have access to knowledge very quickly and easily. But what we do not have access to is what we feel internally.
Yeah.
And I think that meaning and purpose comes from the inside out job.
So if people are, feeling stress, but they are not able to express that stress, they are keeping quiet about their stress. What's actually ironic or maybe even more concerning is that they bury that stress under overworking. So this is what we call high functioning stress, high functioning distress. And then obviously what happens is, as a society, we reward this hustle culture, we reward this performance. So high performing people who are feeling stressed deep down inside, these are the most at risk group of people. because they on the surface look like they're performing so well, so you almost don't feel that
It's
they are
hidden.
in need of
Yeah.
any help at all, right? But it's actually causing them burnout. It's actually eating them inside out. So how can we help this group of people be seen, be understood? How can we normalize the expression that, hey, I'm stressed, I need help? How can we extend our help to this group of people?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it really starts with, elevating the conversations as well in whichever platforms that we are involved in, because there's not enough conversations around mental health. So be it in, high functioning depression or burnout, I think we need to talk about it a lot more. And if we look at, the high achievers, many of them hold leadership positions, and it's lonely at the top, and very often they feel alone, that no one else resonates with their journey, but because they are high functioning, it's easy to turn to more work. It's easy to turn to that as a coping mechanism, but over the long term, the physical health declines, the mental health declines as well. I think our bodies are really not built to withstand that level of stress. We haven't evolved, and so you see mental health challenges coming up, and the whole hustle culture, wearing hard work or overworking like a badge of honor on your sleeve. That's not positive narratives to talk about or to enforce. And in fact, a lot of the bosses, they perpetuate it as well. And when people leave, even though there's a high paycheck and the benefits are good, they don't want to work for such toxic bosses, because they realize that the mental health is suffering. Physically they're not doing great, and they decide to take a step back. And there's more and more of these cases happening, and they have everything going on for them on paper, but they choose to leave.
But even running a business is not easy also. It's not a walk in the park,
yeah.
right? Running a business promises the freedom to, take holidays when you want to, even work from the beaches. But those are just nothing but promises, right? It's like the reality is more than that. And there are people who actually walk out of the frying pan and right into boiling water, because running a business is also a 24/7 thing sometimes.
Yeah, and you never truly shut off. And a lot of the entrepreneurs I know are also high functioning.
Yeah, and then they just keep running and running and
Just
running.
going and going at it. And and unless you put a stop or block out time to rest, you don't fully shut off.
Okay, so for our listeners at home, right, who may be stressed, but they are not aware of their stress signals, right? They are maybe, like you said, they are using hustle, and then they are just like using that adrenaline to kind of push past it. What are some of the symptoms? What are some of the early detection signs that they have to look out for to know that, hey, they may be going down a slippery slope? I
think for many, sleep is very telling.
I feel so caught out here. Okay. I can't help it. Yeah.
So if your sleep quality, some people can still sleep very well when they're highly stressed. I don't. When my sleep quality declines, I know that I'm in quite a stressed out period of my life. And there's a lot about sleep these days, because it reflects the actual reality of work. Which is, overexhausted people, burnt out, overwhelmed. I think secondly also, the peers around you or your family members might be able to tell more than you, because you have your own blind spots. Maybe to you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but your family members might be the ones who are bearing the brunt of it for the past 2 to 3 weeks or months. And they're like, hey, maybe something is not right. Maybe it's time to scale back, or maybe it's time to seek support, get help from professional help. And pencil in some time for rest and relaxation.
True. So let's talk about emotional intelligence in leaders, right? It's like when leaders are not emotionally intelligent, what happens is that they leak and they kind of like perpetrate that negative emotion. Like I said, emotion is contagious, right? So
many of them lead by fear.
They do. So I mean, what are some of the barriers for leaders, being able to manage their own emotions, and what are some of the work that leaders have to do to be able to, as you say, lead from inside out?
I think very sadly, not every leader recognizes the need to change, because they have They have climbed up the corporate ladder so much and so high that, why is there a need to change? They may not see it in themselves. But for those that have climbed really high and they see that need to still pursue that inner work, it really elevates the layers of leadership that they can offer to the team. Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's advice per se, because it takes both hands to clap. They must first recognize the need to want to work on themselves. Because if they're dealing with like issues at home, domestic issues, or stuff that's outside of work, and their levels of emotional intelligence is pretty low, that will trickle into the team. Yeah, and that's not healthy for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does. Just kind of like create this. It's almost throwing your cats among the pigeons, and creates this very anxiety-filled environment. And it's almost palpable, right? It's like you say, you walk into a room, you can feel that everyone's under stress.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even want to say it loudly, but maybe the person who's the greatest cause of that stress is the leader, him or herself.
Yeah. Maybe many of them feel like they have to put on a strong front because they're leading the team. But the irony is that when they start to be a bit more vulnerable about what's really bothering them, or sharing a small snippet of their personal lives that maybe needs a little bit of work at the moment, it makes them more human.
Recently, I was very inspired by a gentleman called Ron Kaufman, and I attended a program of his, a talk by his, and he said very often companies bring him in to change people's mindset. Okay. And he's like, yeah, great. I mean, in ideal world, you can wave a magic wand and everyone's mindset is on point. But mindset is the hardest thing to change. Like a person has been that way for 30, 40, 50, 60 years of life. How can you just change their mindset overnight? But he did say that the pathway to changing the mindset is to change the skill set. Very often people, it's not that they don't have the mindset. Usually the mindset is also a function of the skill set. Like you said, right, they have gotten where they are because of a set of skills. But if you can actually give them a skill to manage their emotions better, then they will be able to then change their mindset. But in order to enable them to have this set of skills, we need to give them a tool set. So I think it goes back down to designing like tools around, giving them that ability to. And I actually have a great opportunity to work with some really great leaders, very, very self-aware, very people-centric leaders. And one of them, he's a ex-client of mine. I have the opportunity to coach, and he shared with me one thing when I met up with him in Malaysia. His last role was a head of country in Malaysia. He's now moved on to global role. Good for him. Good for him. In just a short 5 years, he has ascended a few levels. And he shared with me something. He said, Coen, stillness is not slowness. Stillness is not slow. He said, yes, the world is spinning out of control. Yes, it's a stressful environment. The higher he climbs, the bigger his portfolio and the more decisions he has to make. But he always finds it within himself to find that moment of stillness. Yeah. That moment of stillness where he gets to listen to himself, act from his own set of core values, act from his true north. And paradoxically, when he had that moment of stillness, he's able to execute, he's able to make decisions faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the essence of mindfulness. It's not just about slowness, but are you able to come back to yourself, even if it means, you don't have time to meditate, fine, but are you able to find those moments in a day where you are able to realign back to your purpose, realign back to your true north, like what you mentioned?
Oh yeah, Michelle, that reminds me, right? Recently you shared with me that you're certified and also you're facilitating this program called Search Inside Yourself, which is pioneered by Tan Chik Min of Google. Tell me a little bit more about this Search Inside Yourself program without, of course, giving away the whole thing here.
So in a nutshell, it's a mindfulness-based emotional intelligence program, and we equip everyone with the tools for self-leadership.
And tell me more a little bit.
So we focus on tools such as self-awareness tools, self-management tools, mindfulness tools, and eventually how do they then govern and lead themselves from the inside out. So this also includes, intrapersonal skills, and then moving on into developing interpersonal skills like handling difficult conversations. Like how do you manage that?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm sure people have read the book before, or some people have read the book before, so the information is readily available out there. Can you share with us one specific example of this tool and how he has really transformed your own life and also the life of the leaders you have coached?
Yeah. So one particular tool that I like is called Minute to Arrive. And it's just that it is exactly as what it calls itself to be, which is that full minute to arrive. So if you look at what's happening in a day, many of us have back-to-back meetings. We transit across different roles. We are a mom, a spouse, a child. But how often do you take off one hat and put the other one on? And that minute to arrive gives you that permission to pause and reclaim what you need in that moment to reshift the identity, to reshift and recalibrate back to yourself before you show up for the next role or the next meeting, whatever that looks like for you. Yeah, and there's another tool that I use very interchangeably as well, which is the head, heart, and gut check-in. So
Tell me more. That sounds interesting.
With the first breath, you check in with the head, what thoughts are present. With the second breath, you check in with the heart, what emotions are present. And on the third breath, you check in with the gut. Are there any intuitions or any gut feelings that you have about the situation or the person? So it just requires 3 breaths. You do it in discrete, like a ninja. And when you do that over time, you start to tap in more into head, heart, and gut.
Must it be in that sequence, head first, heart, then
No,
gut?
I think
or
it's just,
you can just jump it up?
Yeah, I prefer the head, heart, gut, but some people have used it gut, head, heart. Yeah,
Okay.
I would say, don't follow it strictly. Like adapt and really customize it to what works for you. Yeah.
I guess for me as a person who often thinks a lot, right? I often default to my head. I just go to my head. But actually, what I've actually done is I've trained myself to disconnect myself from my intuition. Very often when I walk into a space, actually my gut knows the answer. But I just don't trust myself enough. I just don't trust my intuition enough. And when I go into my head, right, that's when I actually get a little easily caught up in my head.
Yeah. And me too. I think it's a practice. Yeah, it's an ongoing practice.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So can I just ask you a question about, Singaporeans and, mental health, right? It's like, do you think that this mental health has been for a long time already, and I think we have been doing this for the last 5 years, at least since COVID. But even before COVID we already started to do this, shoots of mental health. But what do you think needs to happen at a systemic and at a national level for us to really normalize, talking about it and also supporting people with mental health challenges?
I think we are already doing it. And if you notice, the conversations are getting more and more. We're having more and more conversations, and the level of depth is also slowly increasing. So I think it's moving in the right direction, I would say. I think more is better than not having it at all. So the level of stigmatization has also decreased compared to maybe 5 years ago. And I think COVID has really accelerated that. I think systemically we have a lot of work to do. There's just so much to just talk about in a podcast, but I think it really starts with conversations, shifting people's mindsets, because only from that foundation can we then think about policies or regulations to help to support the needs of different people here. Yeah.
But maybe what do you think is the one thing we can do in the next half a year that can really shift
great
the
question.
landscape?
I think we've been talking about regulation for like 3 decades, and very recently Singapore just rolled out a regulation for psychologists. So I think to be able to raise the bar, because it's not it didn't used to be a regulated industry, and with that we see people that may not be so certified or have the right credentials to come out and talk about mental health because they may not have the adequate training to support a range of needs. So I think the next step is to move ahead with more regulation. That's personal take. I'm not affiliated at any organization. So for counselors and psychotherapists, what might that look like as well in the next 6 months?
You brought up a very good point. I was just talking to a few people recently, and I think that a lot of people have really rushed into this whole mental health space, right? I know, Michelle, you are personally very qualified, right? You are qualified in many, many different modalities. You're also a qualified psychotherapist, right? You've done clinical work. But many people in this space, they are not. And then, they may have just attended a course on, mental health, or they may have just attended a program on how to be a public speaker, and then they harbor dreams of becoming a speaker, and then they start to market themselves on LinkedIn as I'm a mental health speaker and everything. And I that concerns me greatly, because there can be a lot of people who are misleading the market. They may not be qualified enough to administer the right intervention at the right time, and that scares me to be honest. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think in what you have shared, right? Yeah, I have seen a lot of a lot of coaches claiming quick fixes for things like depression or mood disorders, which is it should be a no-no, and it's not ethical as well. And probably it starts with good intentions as well. I mean, I give them a benefit of the doubt. There's probably good intentions. But to not be equipped with the right skill set can be very dangerous for the individual. Yeah, and I speak for myself. Like I graduated very recently only from my master's in counselling. Prior to that, I was very much involved in the mental health space because of mindfulness and the self-compassion work. So in terms of clinical practice, I don't have that many years of practice as much as some of the peers that I know and in the space. And I think a lot of them have also spoken up about this exact issue that you were talking about. And I think for listeners, possibly what they could do is also to look at the credentials of the professional that they are looking to work with.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore is a society that really, values certificates and professional qualifications. But I think that maybe the pendulum has swung too far the other way, which is why I think this round of regulations and these regulations that we are starting to put in place right now is a good thing. I totally agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you that it's a good thing, because I think the pendulum has swung a little too far, and then there's a lot of unregulated practitioners.
Yeah, and that's why I think regulation would help to increase the credibility of the profession and the integrity of the profession as well. I just am not sure if by doing that we'll have enough practitioners for everyone. Yeah, because the system feels a little bit overloaded.
I think we can go on and on and on, but we do also have to bring this episode to a close. And typically we ask our guests a few quick fire questions to kind of round up the episode. So I think I have an inkling that I'll definitely invite you again to a podcast. Sure. Kind of like a sequel, because I think there's so much more that we can dive into. So are you ready for the quick fire round?
Yes.
Okay.
I am ready for it.
Coen
has been giving me a lot of surprise questions. So most of what you hear are actually off the cuff, by the way.
And those are the best answers, right? Those are the best answers because that's unfiltered, that's you, that's authentic. So first question.
Yes.
Right. What's the most powerful question you have ever been asked before?
Yeah. Oh, actually two. But do I really have to pick?
Okay, share both.
Okay. So the first one is, my therapist asked me, in the dark times of my eating disorder, who do you want to become when you're 5 years down the road? It's a very typical question, I think.
It's like an interview question, right?
Yeah. It's like, but then
HR will know that.
somehow it unlocked a lot of emotions in me, because I was really struggling. And 5 years down the road, I'm like, oh my God, will I die? So I'm like, 5 years down the road, I don't want to be in misery. I just want to be in happiness. I want to live in joy. And that was one of the most profound shifts from a very, typical question, but when I really dug deeper, I was like, oh my God, the answers are so obvious.
Wow.
Okay, second question. And it came quite recently, which was, as you step into your own power, are you willing to be disliked?
Oh.
And in the past, playing small, playing by the rules, I'm like, I don't want to be disliked. I just want to be nice. I want to be likable. But now I'm like, that book, Courage to be Disliked.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm probably not everybody's flavor and probably quite intense. I can go from 0 to 100 in the conversation, but
I know
that's completely okay if it helps me to support other people's journeys as well. And I think the answer is getting clearer. I wouldn't say it's a hard yes, I'm willing to be disliked, but I think I'm starting to lean into that a lot more comfortably.
Thank you.
Yes.
Who is a supporter or mentor who has made the biggest difference in your life? And I invite you to keep this answer just very, very short in 2 seconds.
Yeah. My therapist, because without her, I wouldn't have walked out of the eating disorder journey.
Thank you.
Yes.
What's one of the most courageous things you have done in your life that's made the biggest difference in your life?
I think the most courageous thing that I've done is to quit my job. Is to really not, on paper it looked really nice, but stepping away from that niceness and that, what society's definition of success is, and just really prioritize on intentional healing. That was very empowering for me.
Thank you, Michelle. And if our listeners at home would like to find out more about you, right, where can they actually find you?
They can actually find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. So if you just type in Michelle Mah, you'll probably be able to find me. I do have my company page, but I think I post more personal stuff there if you want to read more.
Yeah, Michelle also has a TED Talk that is going to be coming up, right?
Yes.
I haven't seen the TED Talk yet, but I'm looking forward to watching that.
Yeah,
I
I'd love
wasn't
to
there.
share that with everyone.
I was overseas when it happened. So yeah. So thank you very much, Michelle.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes.